welcome again to Creative Connections. Today my guest is an artist, blogger, writer, teacher, Tara Erin. Tara, welcome.
Good morning, good evening rather, Gary.
yeah, whatever time of day it might be. So I found you first on the Workshop 13 website, and then kind of dug deeper. And I really loved how you talk a lot about creativity. And when we met the other day and talked, you told me that you're really into intentional creativity. What is intentional creativity?
Well, intentional creativity is the name that is given to a movement founded by the artist Shiloh Sophia. She herself is a student of the poet and her mother, Karen MacLeod, as well as the artist Sue Hoya Sellers. And Sue Hoya Sellers was a student of Lenore Thomas Strauss, who was a very famous sculptor during the New Deal era, and she did a lot of the public works for FDR. So it is a movement with a rich history and also a rapidly expanding contingent of teachers throughout actually all around the world, who teach a largely rooted in a 13-step painting process, which has been known variously as color of woman or intentional creativity method, which tends to focus on paintings of intuitive style and focusing on images of the feminine and really reclaiming that in a world where perhaps they've not been present.
Yeah. It's amazing that we have had a very kind of patriarchal view, including and maybe especially in the arts. Mm-hmm. So I can see where bringing out the feminine is really important. So you have been painting for quite a while.
I have. I've been dabbling in the arts since I was 4 years old, and kneeling over a vinyl 1970s vintage hassock in my grandparents' living room. Probably my first favorite medium that I liked to work on was styrofoam meat trays that my grandmother washed and recycled, and I liked to draw on them in felt markers.
So you were into multimedia before it was cool.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So since you've started studying intentional creativity, how has that affected your artwork?
That's a very interesting question, and I would say that the art behind me here actually is really a good example of sort of a direction that I've been working in since I have started working with intentional creativity. As you can see, it's a very imaginative image. It is an image of the feminine and with a lot of symbolism in it.
Right.
I would say prior to that, I didn't do as much work with that. That said, the reason that it engaged me so much is because it is something that can easily be taught to help encourage others to try and sort of reclaim that creative birthright that so many of us leave behind at the transition to adulthood.
Right. You know, and I think that's such an important thing, because we are born with that. I forget who it is, and probably a lot of people have said it, but we are born artists.
Yes.
Until we are taught that we aren't.
I would agree, and I would also say that in the process of putting together my initiate book to become a certified Color of Woman teacher, I have really been thinking about that phrase, intentional creativity. And it's true that it seems quite intuitive. Okay, you're going to create something and you're going to do it with intention. So how much explanation can it really need? But the truth is, however, that most people, through no fault of their own, run their entire lives on scripts that are given to them by teachers or parents or employers or governments. And what happens is that this puts them into a default mode, and they're being creative because everything we do does set up what happens for us next in life. Everything we do is an act of creation. And yet what we're doing is we're being unintentionally creative.
Right.
And so this is really rare when you find children that are encouraged to look within and to really trust their inner wisdom and find their joy in life. So the work that I do is really intended to help people to reconnect to that and to really give it the validity that it deserves. Intentional creativity as a way of living displaces unintentional creativity. And it helps you to move from being a victim of circumstance to a creator of circumstance, from living under the authority of other people to becoming the author of your own life.
Okay.
And from seeing what you lack and looking around and feeling like you don't have what you need to looking around through fresh eyes, through a child's eyes, and seeing what's possible.
You know, and I like that, seeing it through a child's eyes. That's something that I have explored at times in some of my music. And I think it's so important because, you know, there is an innocence and a sense of wonder
Yes.
that makes the world magical when we allow ourselves to get there.
Yes.
So this particular painting, the one thing that doesn't really show as well when you're on TV is the fact that there are sort of dimension. It's not totally two-dimensional.
Yes.
There are areas that really sort of stand out.
Yeah. This is a very, very heavily textured painting. There's actual lumps you can feel if you
Right, right.
touch on it. This had a lot of layers.
Yeah, I can see that sitting here looking at it, and I have a feeling that probably it doesn't really pick up well on the TV screen. But I love, you know, and I can't say that I understand all the symbolism of it, but I love the symbolism of it, and it to me is such a hopeful and open picture.
It truly is. This was a class that I did as part of an online painting group called Red Madonna, and it's a year-long painting process where each month we have a lesson and we address and work within one of the 13 steps in the 13-step process that I mentioned earlier. And so this particular painting was worked on over the course of 12 months, and in fact it took me longer than that. And really, this was at least 8 different paintings underneath here over the course of that year.
Okay.
It was really my first time getting into this particular methodology, and so I didn't really preserve a lot of the background, which I do tend to do in my paintings now, where there's more transparency and you can see more of what's underneath.
Right.
But this was my first time working in this particular style. And it really does capture quite a lot of the things that are very personal to me. Over here we have an image of a compass. Certainly to me that is symbolic of how we guide our lives. For me, the heart is at the center of the compass. And it also indicates the hero's journey. You may be familiar with Joseph Campbell, and he talks about the hero's journey, and very often a quadripartite circle is used to symbolize that as well.
Okay.
And of course we have a road sort of going up here from the foreground through the portal there, and then she is actually meant to represent the Queen of the Cosmos. That was our theme painting for that year. And,
Okay.
and for me, I tied that into the concept of the music of the spheres. So we actually have sort of a very, very rough musical staff here as well.
Okay, yeah.
And that was clearer at other
And
points.
you know,
but-
it's amazing because I did not really notice it until you said that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, whoa, of course.
Yes. Yep.
But you know, that's what I love about this painting, is that you could spend hours with it and still not see everything there is to see.
Yep. She's quite the she's quite the lady. I actually had several points where she was reminding me of one of my favorite singers from the early 20th century, Jeanette MacDonald.
Okay,
as you
yeah.
can see, she is a redhead, like
Okay.
Jeanette was. And she sang a song that I really loved in the movie Naughty Marietta. That was one of her pairings with Nelson Eddy,
Right.
who, as a good Hawks girl, just like my grandmother and my mother before me, I had a crush on Nelson Eddy too.
Okay.
What a baritone! But she sang this beautiful song called "Ah, Sweet Mystery of Life."
Oh, right.
Yes, and that was also referencing the music of the spheres, and so this is very much grounded in that concept, and I think it is in some ways perhaps a tribute to her influence on my life.
Okay.
I had an opportunity. At one point, I was researching her, and I came across this letter that she wrote to young fans, and it was really such a wonderful model for any young woman who might want to really aspire to greatness in any profession, and the way she spoke to it and encouraged her young
Okay.
readers. So I continue to be a fan, and so I like to think of this as
That's
my
great.
Jeanette MacDonald tribute.
There you go. Now, another thing you showed me is a little booklet, and I can't remember the term you used to describe what that is.
So I believe this is the one you might be talking about.
Right?
And so as you can see, this is what this is. This is a piece of 140-pound watercolor paper, and it's torn and folded into 4 sections. So it creates 8 panels. And what this is actually a visual or graphic representation of my business plan for my
Okay.
teaching studio.
I thought you had said business plan, and
Yes.
then I couldn't quite
Yes.
remember.
And so the idea behind creating this vision book is that I take each of the traditional elements of a business plan. For example, we have here beloveds, which would be who do I serve?
Okay.
And we have what is my passion? What is it that I want to do?
Okay.
And so we take each of these elements and represent them graphically through creating, some people use collage. I personally used just straight painting and line art.
Okay.
And what I did is I allowed the images to emerge and inform what I wanted to include and what I wanted to expand upon. And there were definitely certain elements that came out of the forms of this artwork that I perhaps might not have really connected to. For example, this.
We have a copy of
Yeah.
it up here.
Absolutely. So if you look on the upper corner here, the Council of Muses,
Right.
the butterfly,
Okay.
that concept that it's a transformational collaboration came out of that imagery of the butterfly. That
Okay.
I might not have, framed it quite that way if I were working from a more linear perspective or a more traditional strategic
Right.
planning and business planning perspective. Now what I can do is I can take this and translate it back into a more linear style of business plan with numbers and with
Right.
details. But I've also, because I've already engaged the creative side through this process of creating this image, I now have, inputs that I would not have had if I had taken it from a straight, logical, left brain
Right.
approach.
Sure. I particularly love this panel here with offerings.
Yes.
And there's a picture of your studio.
Yes, that is my home.
And
Actually.
I love the little sign out there that says Tara Erin, welcome.
Yep.
And all of the different things, blog and classes, gallery, all these things. If Harvard had to have people make business plans like this,
Yes.
we'd have a lot better businesses out there.
I think that people would have at least a lot more fun getting them off the ground.
I think so.
And I think that that's actually really probably the key, because this is not my first foray into entrepreneurship. But in the past, whenever I have tried, I've always been trying to, what can I do and what can I respond to that's out in the marketplace? This
Right.
is the first time I'm really doing something that fully and thoroughly comes from me, because this is what I'm passionate about.
Sure.
And
sure.
what I found was that, you know, when I ran a website for about 1.5 years called Mentors and Masterminds, and it was aimed at creating professional development support community for administrative professionals, which is my day job. And it was fun. I really enjoyed it, but I ran out of steam because it wasn't really where my heart lies.
It wasn't your intention.
And when the results weren't there, I didn't have the motivation to keep going.
Right.
This is something that I know I will do come hell or high water. This is something that I will pursue regardless of what the return is, because
Right.
this is what I have to do.
Yeah. Another photo that you sent me, I just love this painting. How big is this painting in reality?
Oh gosh, it is 5 feet by 4 feet.
Right, so
yep.
little large to bring into the studio.
Yes, yep.
But again, this is just so amazing to me. So tell me what's going on here.
So this is the actually final painting for my certification as a Color of Woman teacher.
Okay.
And the theme of this painting is visionary, and the title of my own painting is called Council of Muses. And the underpainting here, and I'm actually going to get up, you can actually sort of see there's some in the underpainting, there's some very geometric shapes.
Okay.
And this is really representative of left brain thinking, of
Okay.
linear and verbal and mathematical, traditional kinds of logic that are supported primarily within our culture. And on this side of the painting, I had a representation of much more organic shapes. And you can actually see some of them, some of the curved lines
Right, right.
that are showing through in the underpainting on this side of the painting. And so this was a representation of how we really deliberately engage both of those in our creation process. But then in the foreground, we also have this dark and light. So we're representing the subconscious and we're representing the conscious mind. And we're thinking about, I like to think of these circles here as dreams, as the ideas that the subconscious gives to us as gifts.
Okay.
And as you see, as they come through here, they become openings and they transform and they hold space.
Okay.
Through which our ideas can go into and re-enter into the fullness of reality, into the world that we actually experience. Okay. And so it's actually, there is, in the layers of this painting, there is a cycle going on of engaging creatively and putting it through the filter of our left brain, but then bringing it back out into the world as well. And down here, this is my personal favorite part of the painting, because this really speaks to what I call my soul work project for Color of Woman. And this is a vision I have to create. As you can see, there's a small table here and chairs gathered around it. This is my Council of Muses. And what I'm hoping to create will be a blend of a mastermind group, but with application of intentional creativity methods. So, for example, we would have a quarterly creative retreat. And in the first quarter, what we would actually be doing is each participant of this mastermind group would have a full day to create his or her own vision plan. And then we would take that as the basis for our work throughout the year, with a monthly meeting and then additional quarterly retreats to have the accountability and support that you get with a traditional mastermind group, but also to really cultivate and nurture the creative side that is so important for creating a heart-centered work.
Okay. And then you also sent me a photo of another painting. I went to your studio the other day, and this one I just really, really loved.
You know, I absolutely adore her too, and she's definitely more on the metaphysical side of things. She actually has the same duality that we saw in the last painting of this would be sort of the imaginative eye, and as you can see, this monocle she's wearing has that compass and that measurement quality to it. So this is, again, the right brain, left brain duality that we're playing with, but then bringing it together here in the area of the heart. And as you can see, we've got a lot of binary data,
Right.
but we've also got organic data, right? We've got the growing things. And so this is really a representation of how we connect right brain and left brain into a richness. And this is also actually representative of, or symbolic of, something that I am very interested in, which is the Akashic Record, which is taught to be sort of the memory of any experiences we may have had over multiple lifetimes here on the earthly plane. And it is very, very interesting, but it also touches on that.
Right, right.
So
absolutely wonderful. So
yeah,
there are a lot of layers to your paintings.
there are.
How do you know when a painting is finished?
That is a great question, and I don't always. But one of the things I actually really appreciate about the 13-step process is when I'm done with step 13, I'm at a point where it's very easy to evaluate and then say, what more does this painting need, or is it done? And I think that's an actual interesting part of the process. In fact, a lot of times I'd like to say we almost engage our creations in conversation throughout the process, you know, and asking, what does the painting want, as if it takes on a life of its own, because it does represent a portion of my psyche.
Sure.
And so we're creating a dialogue, and so you really have to, ultimately, when you know it's done is when you have developed enough confidence in your own self to accept that it is, and that it's okay, even if it's not perfect.
You know, and I think perfection is the enemy of creativity.
Perfection is highly overrated.
It certainly is, as I like to tell my wife.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, this painting is absolutely perfect. Mm-hmm. But you know, I could see that, you know, when you continue to work on something, you run that risk of having hit where it belongs and not seeing it and going beyond.
Absolutely, and I've done that. And that's okay too, I've learned. And as a matter of fact, there were many times in the process of this, the other painting, the one that I brought into the studio today, where I thought, it's done and I can't do anything more. But in the case of that painting, because it was more about the full year learning experience and the deep dive,
right.
I moved forward in spite of the fact that I felt the painting was done, because I was more interested in the process and in excavating what it was out of my story that I needed to have at that time.
Right, right. You do have another painting that you brought.
I do. I love this one.
Let's get that one up.
Yep. And this one I call Our Lady of Compassion.
Okay.
And she was painted back a couple of years ago after the Paris bombings.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to give a representation of the feeling of compassion. I actually went from there and did a research about, I just looked up in Wikipedia, acts of terrorism in the year 2015, I think it was. And I was blown away by how much is happening even on a daily basis all around the world.
Right.
And so I really felt it was important to represent the entirety of the world in this image. And really, you know, I have myself, or that is to say a human figure here sitting on the shoulder as the knitter. And this is a really important piece, because as you can see, she is knitting, and her knitting is coming out as these strands of DNA that are healing the world.
Uh-huh.
And wrapping it in the compassion from the mother, so that we are really collaborators in this process of creating the healing that we would like to see in the world.
Yeah. You know, I'm looking at this, and I am old enough to remember when I was a kid, in Sunday school, we would sing that song, He's Got the Whole World in His Hands.
Yes, yes.
And I like that this is the feminine. She's got the whole world in her hands.
Yes.
Absolutely wonderful, wonderful painting, and the meaning is so great. So now you're leading workshops at your home, is that correct?
I am indeed. As a matter of fact, I had my first workshop back on
And
September
I think
29th.
we might have a picture of that.
We do, yeah, there we go. So this workshop was called Meet Your Muse, and I had a group of 5 women, most of them administrative professionals from the Boston and Hartford area, and my son's girlfriend. Looks
Okay.
like it's cut off there on the top a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, this was such a treat. Most of these women, none of these women had picked up a paintbrush in many, many years, and 2 of them hadn't painted ever before.
Wow.
And so we went through, and this is me with my painting here in the front, and as you can see, we did an image of the feminine, and in a very intuitive style where everybody's painting came out very, very different.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to hear, you know, the different stories and what resonated for each of the students. You know, you go to a sip and paint, and it's fun, and you can create something very
Right.
satisfying and so forth. But it's all the same painting. What I really, really love about this is that this is really giving people a way in to develop confidence in their own creative,
Right.
generative power.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, but if people are interested in your workshops, how do they get a hold of you?
The best way would be to go to my website, which is taraerin.com, TARAERIN.com, and you can also email me, tara@taraerin.com.
Okay, excellent. I would love to continue talking to you, so we will definitely have to have you back on the show in the future.
I would be
Thank you
delighted
so
to.
much for coming in, and thank you for joining us again on Creative Connections, and we will see you next time.